Have you ever signed up for a service and not use it? Perhaps paying for a streaming service you're not watching regularly, or renewing that MMO account on the chance you might one day log in again. Well, this year I've been much more aware of where my money has been going. My PlayStation Plus ran out in March, and I've had no desire to use Sony's online since. I used Xbox Game Pass for a month to play some games here and there, but made sure to cancel it after. However, my Nintendo Online account is still active as of now, and there's one part of the service I haven't been taking advantage of. And if I'm paying for it, I might as well make use of it. This month, let's take a look at the classic games of the Nintendo Online. I was actually really excited when I heard this was the direction Nintendo would take in replacement of their Virtual Console service. A Netflix-style application where you can pick from a whole library of titles on a whim? It was a much more consumer-friendly approach. Sadly, it also has a lot of downsides too. My first impression of the service has been rather underwhelming. It doesn't take a while to scroll through all the games on both the NES and Super Nintendo apps. It just doesn't feel like there's a lot here. I understand that securing rights for the games like Mega Man or Castlevania is probably difficult, and I don't want to complain too much about what isn't here. But there are a few key titles that are totally MIA. Like no Earthbound? Seriously? Donkey Kong Country 2? What reason is there for that to not be present? Perhaps I would be less critical if there were at least more console libraries available. Like no N64? No GameCube? No Game Boy even? How have we gone more than 3 years since the Switch launched and I still don't have a legitimate way to play Super Mario 64? Well, even just considering what's available to play, the offerings do feel rather meager. At the very least, I would say that most of the must-play titles on the consoles are available, but in a way where it feels like they set out to accomplish the bare minimum. I still wish I had access to more games. At least more titles for the NES and SNES. As it turned out, I was able to find a solution. Now don't tell Nintendo I did this, but I was able to hack into their mainframe. While eluding detection, I followed a cyber trail that allowed me to insert my own credentials into their system, giving me an all-access pass to even more video games. By that I mean I just installed the Japanese versions of both apps. Not only does this give me a number of new games to play, but access to the Japanese versions of the games I already had. And to me, this adds a ton more value to the service, bringing the offered games up to a number I'm satisfied with. Sometimes it's impossible to tell what you need to do. I tried playing Shin Megami Tensei, and I couldn't make it very far since I can't read the dialogue. But the great thing about most of the games is that they are simple and intuitive enough that it doesn't matter what language you play in. In fact, most of the first-party Nintendo titles you see me use footage for in this video are the Japanese versions. In fact, it's almost a fun novelty in itself to be able to point out the regional differences, like how Super Metroid is pretty much all in English automatically, including the narration at the beginning of the game. I guess that iconic Link to the Past title screen was something exclusively made for the international version. I was even taken aback by the fact that the Japanese Legend of Zelda has loading times. I also found it amusing that instead of deleting a file, it's instead called kill mode in Japanese. How brutal. It's a shame you have to go out of your way to download the Japanese libraries if you do live outside the territory. I think that's another small thing they could add to the applications that would theoretically not be too hard, yet still add a ton of value to the service. But maybe they have to keep them separate for legal reasons. I don't know. Well, either way, I've had a great time revisiting some of the classic titles. But there are a few problems that I do have. One is that this border surrounds every game. It's not particularly ugly or distracting, but I would rather it not be there. And there isn't a way to turn it off. The bigger issue I have is with the controller. I don't like the Switch's D-pad. It feels so imprecise, and sometimes I move it in ways I don't intend to, which is a problem for these classic games. Nintendo does sell some classic controllers to help replicate the feel of the old games, but I don't have that. Overall though, I did enjoy my time with the classic game service. I don't know if it's something I'm going to actively use anymore, but I think it's fine enough to dip into every now and then to try out some old games from time to time. If you happen to be someone asking for recommendations from the games I've been playing, then I guess we can do a quick lightning round. Number 1, NES, Star Tropics. Gotta shout out my favorite NES game, especially since it is a rather underrated gem. And now if you have the Nintendo Online service, then you don't have any excuses to not try it out. There is a certain rigidness to the game that makes it hard to get into. but it's so meticulously designed around its quirks that I think it's fun regardless. At the end of the day, it's plain to see that this game has a big heart. Number 1, SNES, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Certainly not the most underground game on the Super Nintendo, but I just love A Link to the Past. While not my favorite Super Nintendo game, it's just such a classic title that I can't help but fall in love with every time it's brought up. It's absolutely worth giving a shot. Number 2, NES, Crystallis. A really janky but otherwise solid game. If you love Zelda, then it's a must-play, I think. There's nothing that stands out as being exemplary, but it's a competent action RPG. Be ready to pull up a guide from time to time, though. It can be rather confusing. Number 2, SNES, Wild Guns. Never had I played Wild Guns previously. I'm typically not as interested in arcade action, but there is something about this game that's just so fun. Dang is it hard, but dang am I excited to give it another go. Number 3, NES, Kirby's Adventure. Oddly enough, I had never played Kirby's Adventure before now, and I think I found a new favorite Kirby game. It's held up very well, and the simplicity of it all is just so endearing. With the real world being a scary place right now, maybe it's not a bad idea to take a trip to Dreamland and show some love to everyone's favorite pink ball of joy. Number 3, SNES, Super Metroid. I've never really been a big fan of Metroid, but Super Metroid is one example that shows there's hope for me yet. I think the opening hours to the game are incredibly strong. This is one game I'm definitely gonna have to dedicate a weekend to at some point.